Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Israel. The flu is back and it's in full force. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says 25 states are seeing high numbers of influenza, and Texas is experiencing the worst outbreak so far, reporting at least 21 deaths. Caitlin Burke reports.
Fever, chills, muscle aches, all telltale signs of the flu. Health officials say we're entering the high point of flu season, and the number of cases are spiking across the country.
The number of positive flu tests that we've had in the last couple weeks are up about 8 times what they were in early December. So without a doubt, we're seeing a lot of flu.
The reports we're getting from the emergency rooms and people are really dramatically picked up as positive influenza reports.
H1N1 is reported to be the most common strain of the flu this year. That's the same strain that caused a worldwide pandemic back in 2009, and it's hitting young people the hardest.
Young adults, healthy adults, have been impacted tremendously in terms of the illness.
This year's strain is even affecting some people who got their annual flu shot. But on CBN's Newswatch, medical reporter Lori Johnson said the vaccine is still your best defense against the flu.
It is not too late to get the flu shot, but keep in mind it takes 2 weeks for the flu shot to take effect. And this is why we sometimes hear people say, I got the flu shot and then I got the flu. Well, it's because they got the flu in that 2-week window between when they got the shot and when it started protecting them.
There are a number of steps you can take to lessen your chances of getting the flu. Health officials recommend washing your hands often, getting plenty of sleep, and taking your vitamins. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
More damage control for New Jersey Governor Christie today. His office is scheduled to release thousands of internal documents in an investigation into his staff's involvement in closing several lanes of the George Washington Bridge last year. Christie apologized Thursday and fired a top aide implicated in the scandal. He said he had no knowledge of the plan, but maintains it is ultimately his responsibility. Emails and text messages reveal Christie's deputy chief of staff ordered the closures, causing massive traffic jams for days. The move was said to be political payback for the Democratic mayor of Fort Lee, who declined to support the Republican governor's re-election bid. Political analysts say Christie, who may run for president in 2016, is likely to survive the scandal, provided there are no more surprises.
Will this be a trickle situation? In other words, Christie says he knew nothing about any of this, but, oh my goodness, in about a week or maybe a few days from now, what if all of a sudden he did know, or there's sense that he did know, or there's other aides that knew, and all of a sudden Christie's the only one that didn't know? And that raises the question of, well, how could the governor of a state like New Jersey not know any of this was going on? And so I think we'll find out soon enough whether or not this hurts his reputation.
Investigators are looking for evidence that Christie did know about the plan.
The leader of the investigation into the IRS targeting of conservative and Tea Party groups is a political supporter of President Obama. The Washington Times reports that congressional Republicans found that the lead investigator is Barbara Bosserman. She's a trial lawyer in the Justice Department, and she donated more than $6,000 to Obama's campaigns in 2008 and 2012. Republicans say putting her in charge has ruined the investigation. The Justice Department is supposed to be looking into why the IRS held up the applications of Tea Party groups as they tried to get tax-exempt status. Congressional Republicans say they haven't been able to get any information from the investigation.
And joining us now with more is Jordan Sekula of the American Center for Law and Justice. The ACLJ represents 41 Tea Party groups in a federal lawsuit against the IRS. Is there much hope of an impartial investigation when the investigator is an ally of the president?
We have serious concerns now. First, because the conflict of interest. The Department of Justice has said, well, these career employees, these are people who are not political appointees but bureaucrats. We can't look into their political background. Even if that's the case, the attorney herself here, Barbara Bosserman, who may be a wonderful attorney and may, in some world where we don't have this information, be able to carry out an investigation that was adequate. But because of what we know, it raises serious conflict of interest. And as an attorney, she should have known that this would become a scandal within a scandal, thus causing more trouble for the administration administration because of this conflict of interest. So they've got to deal with more partisan politics at play in an issue, an investigation into whether or not conservative groups were illegally targeted by the IRS because of their viewpoint. And the lead investigator from the Department of Justice happens to be someone who strongly disagrees with the viewpoints of these groups. So there's the first issue, is the conflict of interest.
Well, we are seeing Chris Christie take a lot of heat over the bridge closure scandal. Why hasn't the media been as outraged over the IRS scandal?
You know, it seems like any chance, even with Chris Christie, who's been more popular, let's say, in the mainstream or with moderates and even some Democrats, that when it comes down to it, if there's a chance to bash Republicans or to trash Republicans, they jump on that opportunity. I think Chris Christie is a former U.S. attorney. He made a lot of promises yesterday. He knows what those promises mean if he wasn't telling the truth. I think we have to take him at his word. That's what we should do. I believe we do that. He took action. Here's the difference between Chris Christie, an executive leader as the governor of New Jersey, and President Obama and Eric Holder here in Washington, D.C. in the Obama administration. Chris Christie fired people yesterday. He removed people from their positions, and he said he did it immediately after finding out that they lied to him. Here we have a scandal, the IRS scandal, and I want to report to everyone the FBI has finally, 7 months later, they contacted some of our clients, not all of them, but just a few actually, to schedule some kind of interviews with the FBI. So that is progress to an extent. But now, with the word that the Department of Justice has appointed someone, it'd be like if Chris Christie appointed one of his top donors to investigate this scandal. Do you think the mainstream media would accept that? Do you think Chris Christie would be dumb enough to even try that? No, because he's trying to keep himself above scrutiny. This administration looks like in this IRS scandal is trying to slow walk it. So we now have responded back to the Department of Justice because we're reevaluating our strategy and approach in light of the news that the lead attorney on this case is a person who's maxed out to President Obama's campaigns twice.
Absolutely. Jordan Secular of the American Center for Law and Justice, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
The Department of Veterans Affairs is reporting a sharp increase in suicides among young veterans. According to the latest data released, the suicide rate for male veterans between the ages of 18 and 29 increased nearly 44% from 2009 to 2011. The rate among female veterans increased more than 11%. The department says too many younger veterans are getting care for physical wounds, but they're not seeking treatment for mental health issues. Suicide rates among veterans are higher than non-veterans for both men and women.
A new terrorism scare in Russia in the lead up to the Sochi Olympics. Russian security forces are conducting an anti-terror sweep in Stavropol, just 200 miles east of Sochi. That after 6 dead bodies and explosive devices were discovered. The victims were found with gunshot wounds. Their bodies were found in 4 different cars, and 3 of the cars had been rigged with bombs. One of those bombs went off, but no one was hurt. Officials suspect it is all related to an Islamic insurgency simmering in a nearby region. The incident comes after 2 suicide bombings last month in southern Russia that killed 34 people. The Winter Olympics kick off in just 3 weeks.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is traveling to the Middle East in search of a peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. But one reported part of the agreement has many Israelis worried. Chris Mitchell has the story from Israel's Jordan Valley.
Kerry is expected back in Israel soon for another round of talks. Those talks could have a major impact on one of Israel's most strategic areas. The Jordan Valley straddles the border between Israel and the Kingdom of Jordan. According to some reports, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is proposing an international force, perhaps U.S. troops, to control the valley and eventually turn it over to the Palestinian Authority. The Jordan Valley runs from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. It's about 75 miles long and 9 miles wide. It forms a natural barrier between Israel and its neighbors to the east, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Many see it as Israel's security belt, a geographical barrier and an indispensable military buffer. It's been reported the Palestinian Authority is demanding the Jordan Valley as part of an agreement with Israel. But should Israel give up this strategic piece of land?
That Israel is entitled to defensible borders on which Israel can defend itself with its own forces. And the only available defensible borders is here in the Jordan Valley.
Retired General Uzi Dayan lectures military leaders around the world about the strategic value of the Jordan Valley. He also points out it's only 40 miles from the Jordan Valley to the Mediterranean Sea.
Almost everybody understands that my 3 points, which says defensible borders should give you a strategic depth, a capability to defend yourself from an outside attack, and combating effectively terrorism.
Diane also says instability on Israel's eastern front in Syria, Iraq, and Jordan is another reason to keep the Jordan Valley. David El Haini, the mayor of the Jordan Valley Regional Council, wonders what will happen if Israel's friends are wrong.
Our friends, the United States, the European states, says take chance, take risk for the peace, and give up all the area. And what will happen after 5 and 10 years if we will take those risks? And the border will be near Tel Aviv, and they will throw fire and bombs to Tel Aviv. We can't take any risk. The Jordan Valley has to be under Israeli sovereignty.
Past history has made Israelis reluctant to give away land. In 2000, they pulled out of South Lebanon, and Hezbollah filled that vacuum. In 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza, and now Hamas controls that area. While the peace talks go on, many don't want the same fate to come to the Jordan Valley. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Jordan Valley.
A church in Indiana has donated more than $1 million to fund new translations of the Bible. According to Wycliffe translators, the donation is the largest ever by a single congregation. The donation came from College Park Church. The church's global outreach pastor says there was no special effort to break a donation record and that God did it. The funds will be used to translate the Bible into 7 languages used by more than 1 million people in Asia.
Coming up, how the Environmental Protection Agency bypassed Congress to help wage a war on coal. 9 West Virginia counties are in a state of emergency following Thursday's chemical spill in the Elk River. It happened in Charleston, the state's capital. FEMA and the West Virginia National Guard are now set to help distribute water, with hundreds of thousands of people unable to use the water in their homes. The problem began in a storage tank full of chemicals used to process coal. The spill inundated the river and a nearby water treatment plant. Many schools, restaurants, and health facilities will be closed today.
In West Virginia, coal is king. The industry provides nearly half of America's electricity and employs about 500,000 people.
That's right, but the Obama administration's push for green energy is hurting the industry. Critics charge the EPA is waging a war on coal, a war that's killing jobs and could make your energy bills higher. Paul Strand tells us how.
The Environmental Protection Agency decided in late 2009 that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, and therefore the agency could regulate it under the Clean Air Act. The Supreme Court backed this controversial idea, and that set the EPA loose to impose numerous regulations on important industries. For instance, it's come out with regulations so strict on new coal plants, some in Congress say it amounts to a war on coal.
This war on coal is going to cost thousands of jobs, those that work in the mining industry, as well as those that are dependent upon the affordable, reliable electricity that coal provides.
Is the EPA the Environmental Protection Agency, or does it really stand for the Employment Prevention Agency?
Coal gives America 40% of its electricity. Hobbling it is sure to mean higher energy prices.
It is fundamentally immoral for the federal government to put hard-working, middle-class American families into economic distress. And that is exactly what this war on coal does.
Let's talk about our senior citizens on fixed incomes. If these regulations go forth, it is going to be impossible for them to cool their homes in the summer and heat them in the winter.
So if you want to take low-income working moms and dads, single parents, and make their lives more miserable, more difficult, make their paychecks go less far, these are the regulations that will do it.
But the EPA and its allies warn unfettered global warming will destroy crops, unleash numerous superstorms even worse than Sandy, and be much more devastating to the economy. Still, some lawmakers say there's a deeper issue, that rule by regulation from the presidential administration, rather than legislation from Congress, is also dangerous for democracy.
When we separated powers, Montesquieu said if you let the executive legislate, there'll be a type of a tyranny. This is a type of a tyranny. We will fight it, not just because it's bad for jobs and bad for coal, but because it goes against everything we stand for.
Many say the boom in cleaner natural gas means it can replace coal. And some in the natural gas industry who put big money into this war on coal are cheering now.
And the natural gas industry thought they were very clever. We've kneecapped coal. Now everything will switch to natural gas and we'll make a fortune.
Phil Kerpen, author of Democracy Denied.
Well, the Sierra Club has since announced the sequel to their Beyond Coal campaign. It's called Beyond Natural Gas. And now they're saying they will sue to stop every single natural gas plant from being sited in this country.
When President Obama got elected, he campaigned on a plan that said under my plan, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. His former Secretary of Energy said he'd like to see European-style gasoline prices. Recently, a chief advisor said that a war on coal is exactly what we need.
And we're going to continue fighting in a bipartisan way to block the Obama administration's attempt at not only this war on coal, but a war on all American energy.
A major reason Congress hasn't fought much against global warming is there's no consensus in Congress on how much man can really fight the threat or even how real it is. But the EPA believes wholeheartedly in that threat, which Kerpen thinks is amazing as it's all based on computer projections that may not be right.
And the idea that we're going to make people suffer, make them pay higher energy bills every single month because of a computer model that could be totally wrong, claims there's a benefit 300 years from now. It's a crazy way to do business, and these models get changed all the time. The next version of them could say something totally different.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, the man once known as Football Rambo talks about going to battle every weekend. We'll sit down with the All-Pro receiver, Steve Smith.
Well, football fans know the Carolina Panthers have been one of the surprises of the season. After the first few weeks, they looked to be dead in the water. Now they're division champs, and they made it to the playoffs.
Well, one reason for the turnaround has been the leadership of the star receiver, Steve Smith. Recently, Sean Brown sat down with the All-Pro wideout, who talked about his own personal turnaround.
We're not exchanging cookie recipes. We're not playing patty cake. It's one of my ex-teammates, Julius Peppers, 6'7". He's not coming to, kind of pat me on the shoulder and say, hey, good catch. He's trying to knock my block off.
Carolina Panthers wide receiver Steve Smith has been described as one of the most aggressive receivers in the game. At 5'9", 185 pounds, he's easily one of the smallest, but he's also one of the most productive.
When you're playing football and you line up against guys that may be a little bit bigger, you have to take something to the field to be competitive. People call that a chip.
Yes, some people call
that a chip on your shoulder.
In this business, I make a lot of money, but at the same time, I work with my hands. And when you work with your hands and you work in a blue-collar job, you got to bring your hard hat. Yeah. And so that's what I believe in. I believe in doing with your whole heart. As God said, there's going to be one person that win the prize. So run the race to win the prize.
That approach seems to have paid off. For his first 8 seasons, Steve tore up the field with his strong hands and quick feet. Opposing teams would even assign 2 players to defend him. During the 2005 season, the 5-time Pro Bowler led the league in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. But with the success he had on the field came a sense of pride that caused him to neglect the faith he had found years earlier.
I accepted Christ in the boiling room of Tampa Bay, 2003. I accepted Christ, but I didn't understand the responsibility, understand the full lifelong commitment, the true covenant between a believer, myself, and with Christ. And so just kind of was lukewarm, was straddling the fence, kind of looked forward when I needed it, but when I didn't need it, just kind of shoved it to the side.
With pride in the driver's seat, that chip on Steve's shoulder led to physical altercations with opposing players and even teammates. And one morning during the 2010 season, he took a long, hard look at himself.
I really just did not recognize the man, the young man in the mirror. I didn't recognize him, I didn't see it, I didn't like what I saw. Vain, egotistical, self-centered. The world revolved around me, and it was the only important thing at that time was me. And that's not how real life works. That's not what it's about. That's not what a husband ought to think or ought to be. That's not what a father ought to be.
He says that's when he was faced with a question from God.
God just really broke me and asked me that question that I think everyone has in different ways, which was, you've played this game long enough for yourself. When are you going to start playing for me? And so that was a question that was, it hit home.
At that moment, Steve decided it was time to get off the fence. So he rededicated his life to the Lord.
It really took me, statistically, that was pretty much the worst year I've had in my professional career outside of breaking my ankle after going to Super Bowl. But spiritually and mentally and physically, it was probably the most best year I've had.
Steve had found peace within himself and on the field. He says he's made a lot of bad choices in his career, but his best decision was getting serious with Christ. And now, he's all about leading by example and sharing his story of God's unwavering love.
You can have your bank account at Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, every big business. But on that weekend, they aren't open. At midnight, when you're broken, that bank account is going to help you. God has been in my life, whether I've known it or not, and been looking out for me the days that He knows, He's known, and He's been there in the muck and the mire. For me, He's redemptive. He's that father that even when your dad is, when he's striking out, that He'll hold you.
CBN's Orphans Promise helped fund this year's Day of Prayer for Orphans in Ukraine.
That's right. Millions of believers from more than 20,000 churches across the nation came together for the event. It included church services in different cities. Government officials and clergy came together with the common goals to give each orphan an opportunity to be part of a family and to know the love of God. Orphans Promise also helped to distribute Bibles to more than 6,000 orphans.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Beautiful children. And a beautiful project,
Absolutely.
Orphans Promise. Well, that is going to do it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
And take the time to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you guys will join us right here next time. Have a fabulous Friday and a wonderful weekend.